Please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome to the regular school committee meeting for the Attleboro School Committee for Monday, January 27th. This is your notice that this meeting is being electronically recorded. The first item on this very packed agenda and in this very packed room is a celebration of the student artwork here in the Zito Conference Room. And for that, I will turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Lori Regan.
Thank you, Chairman Geddes. So tonight we're honored to have so many students and their families here to give them an opportunity to showcase their talent and their artistic creativity. It is quite an accomplishment to have artwork selected for this room. There are many staff members from across the district that come into this space and actually take time to look at all of the detail that is in every single piece that is shared in this room. So I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. And then also, I also want to make sure that Ms. Lemieux and the art teachers know how grateful we are for all of their hard work in supporting our students and their passion for the arts. And so with that, I'd like to hand it over to Ms. Lemieux. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us tonight. I want to thank the committee again for honoring our fabulous artists. We're so grateful and lucky to be able to highlight these talented and creative students in such a wonderful and positive way. It is often, when we place importance on creative expression like this, it really encourages artists of the future, and we see so many wonderful artists here tonight, and I love seeing how excited they are to see their work displayed, and when I come into this room, it just makes me happy to see it all hanging, and I love the fact that we can switch it out and honor a number of artists throughout their years here in Attleboro Public Schools. So, as always, we're grateful for this opportunity, and we look forward to another round of artists being highlighted in April. So thank you so much for your support and encouragement. We appreciate it.
Excellent, thank you. And I will say, sitting on this side of the room, I can't speak for the entire committee, but sometimes it is distracting seeing the great artwork behind people that are speaking, because it truly is phenomenal, and it is something that we all really enjoy seeing. For all of the students in the room, we do have certificates for you, and I'll be calling your name up by school shortly. But the certificate reads, "The Attleboro School Committee hereby extends its appreciation to," student name, "for contributing to the student artwork display in the Francis Zito Conference Room, for helping to ensure the conference room of the governing body of the Attleboro Schools is a welcoming, vibrant, and student-centric atmosphere. The school committee extends its sincere gratitude." So congratulations to all of you. We're going to start with the high school. So as your name is called, if you could come up to the podium area. And for the high school, Mr. Storrs has certificates for Leilani Eam, Nithdari Feng, Knox Salinas, and Taya Torres. You don't need to wait for me to read all the names. You can come right up. Committee members, if there are any leftover certificates, I'll collect those from you. For Brennan Middle School, Mr. Domenici has certificates for Bruna Andrade, Robert Paveo, Sarah Ortiz, and Mo Vivar. Also from Brennan Middle School, Mr. Bennett has certificates for Piper Bernard, Hazel Bates, and Emma Sorrento. For Coelho Middle School, Mr. Domenici has certificates for Madison Dolbin and Isla McAdams. Also from Quello Middle School, Mr. Larson has certificates for Madeline Young and Malaya Davis. From Wamsutta Middle School, Ms. Johnson has certificates for Lincoln Dean, Joseph Reyes, Avery Richard, and Ayana Maloney.
Jake first.
From Hyman Fine Elementary School, Ms. Porto has certificates for Addison Erickson, Grace Bhatia, and Kira Boyar. Oh for 3. Sorry, Ms. Porto. For Hill Roberts Elementary School, Mr. Larson has a certificate for Rockford Smith. For Studley Elementary School, sorry to make you walk back up, Mr. Larson. Mr. Larson has certificates for Lucas Chartier and Colette Sampson. For Thatcher Elementary School, Mr. Frappier has certificates for Mia Ramos and Olivia Kiefer. And from Willett Elementary School, Mr. Frappier has certificates for Grayson Little and Heba Bencora. And so as our last students return to their seats, if you heard your name but you weren't able to be here tonight, the schools will have your certificates for you. Before the students and families leave the room, I'll open it up to the committee for any additional comments or questions or thoughts. Mr. Larson?
It's one of the nights that we look forward to the most. So all I can say is thank you so much for sharing it with us, and we will enjoy it every time we're here. So thank you.
Any other comments?
Perfectly stated.
Congratulations all again. Thank you very much. You are welcome to stay here for the rest of our meeting, but it is not nearly as exciting as what just occurred. So we will pause a moment for students and families to head out, and then we'll continue with the rest of our agenda. Thank you all so much for coming.
Yeah, Aaron. I'll pass it down to.
How is it? Color. Blue color. The bright blue?
Thanks, Bill.
It's Kevin's toy, but I did drive it.
I saw the key and I'm like, oh, it's got to be that.
A lot of fun.
I like the macaroni cheese color one. I don't know why. It's so ugly, but I like it at the same time.
Thank you.
Things happen, life is crazy.
Right.
Put a deposit down on the new Scout they're coming out with in 2 years. The Scout electric with a gasoline ring.
Thank you.
Really.
The next item on our agenda is the superintendent's report, and for that, I will turn it over to Superintendent Sawyer.
Thank you, Chairman. I have a number of actually weighty issues for us this evening. The first of which is that, as promised, I need to report back to the committee and the community on the incident at Thatcher in November. Now that we have concluded the matter, it is appropriate for me to brief the committee on exactly what it is that happened and the outcome of that incident. As I've already said, I would like to restate that the slapping of a student is an outrageous incident, one that was taken extremely seriously because it violates our most basic trust with the families that we serve. In this particular case, it's especially egregious because it involved our most vulnerable students. I apologize again to the families who were involved in this, and I want to apologize to the community as a whole that this happened on my watch. We have several priorities, some of them competing in working through this matter. First and foremost, as always, was the safety of our students. We also had to protect the rights of individuals. Some of those individuals are staff members, some of those individuals are our students. Because of the rights of individuals, it is important that the committee understand and the community watching at home that when we're talking about specifics and details related to specific, in most cases we're talking about here, students here, this is privileged information and information that we need to protect. So I will not be getting into details about the specifics related to certain individual students, and be keeping my remarks generally so that we're on safe ground. Another one of our priorities was transparency. It is important that as a public institution, the community is briefed on exactly what happened and how we have handled it. The schools, as we talk about all the time, belong to the community and they have a right to know. I do appreciate the patience the committee has extended in giving us the time to do what we needed to do, but this moment is important because we do need to report back on the particulars. And finally, there needs to be accountability, right? If we're going to regain the trust for those involved that we've lost it, we have to demonstrate that we as an institution will hold people accountable and take steps to ensure that this is unlikely to occur again. I'd like to start this evening by just reviewing the incident itself and go over the details of the incident. I know that in some of the commentary I've seen, there's some information out there that I think would be helpful to clarify exactly what happened. First, I think it's important that the context of this incident is part of the story. This happened in one of our sub-separate classrooms. It involves students with our most challenging needs in the district. And it is the nature of the students that we serve in that room that the interactions in that particular classroom are, on a daily basis, physical in nature. This is not a general ed classroom. This is a room in which students and staff are interacting physically every day as part of what the needs of the students are and how we conduct that space. And that is in no way an explanation for what happened, but it is important that anyone who is following this along understands that it's a very different setting than I think some people might imagine. So it all begins around midday, where a staff member witnesses the teacher in the room slap one of the students. That staff member, pretty close to immediately, makes the decision that this must be reported and heads to his supervisor to report the incident. On the way to do so, there was a fire alarm at Thatcher that day. And the staff member, understanding that back to safety first, he needed to turn around and go back to the room and help evacuate the room as part of the fire drill. And it was not a planned fire drill, so there was the potential that there was actually a fire happening. It was not the case. It was an accidental pull. But staff member went back, helped with the evacuation, and then when that was completed, did go back and finally catch up with the supervisor to make the report. So that did slow down the ability to make the report. That person then took that information and immediately notified the administration, which then started to follow its processes, which involved one, notifying central office, reviewing to make sure that they had it right in terms of what next steps exactly were, and then had to take the steps to be able to bring in the staff member who was alleged to have slapped a student to interview her. So that requires both getting coverage, because back to safety, you can't just remove the staff member from the room and leave the room unattended. And you have to also, the staff is entitled union representation, and so you have to arrange for coverage for the union representation as well. So it took a few minutes to make sure that all the coverage was in place. The staff member was then interviewed, and based on that exchange, the staff member was at that moment directed to go home, sent home on leave. Then they opened up a full investigation, and at that point, they had 75 minutes until the close of school. This was the day before Thanksgiving break. So I think it's really important for people to understand that anyone that they didn't get a chance to speak to in that moment, where they were going to be required to wait until almost a week later to speak with them. And so it was really important that they interview anybody who had the potential to witness the incident while it was the day of, rather than a week later. So they interviewed 7 staff members in the 75 minutes that they had. Then that included the day. They then needed to attend to their responsibilities in the dismissal of school, right? There are several hundred students who need to go home and get them on buses safely and conduct the school's dismissal process. So they dismissed the building, and then once dismissal was done, they had to begin their notifications. They called central office to get us up to speed. They called DCF to report the abuse. They called APD to report the possibility of a crime. And then when that was all done, they began calling families. I know that some people have asked, why does it take so long to call the families? I think it's important to note that when we call families, especially to notify them that something has happened, something that would concern them about their children, we need to be in a position where we actually have some answers as to what has happened and what it is that we're doing about it. I think people can imagine that if we called and said something may have happened and can't provide any answers as to what we think happened, or don't have any answers as to what we've done, that's a very different conversation than to be able to say, this is what we believe happened specifically, and here are the steps that we've taken. Those are two very different conversations, and in our minds, those things have to unfold before we can make those calls. So that's what happened. I think one of the big questions we have to ask as an administration is, upon reflection, how did this happen, and was there something that we could have done to prevent it? Right? What is predictable is preventable, and so was this in some way predictable? Was there something that happened before this moment that could have allowed us to have prevented it? So the most obvious is the hiring process itself. This was a new employee hired this school year with us just from the start of school. So we looked thoroughly into whether or not the hiring of the staff member was done appropriately. All the processes that we have established in the district were followed, and it was an appropriate hiring process. The employee we verified all their credentials, right? So this is a licensed teacher, and all the materials that they provided were verified, and we do our reference checks. Now, I know many of us are understandably cynical about the process of checking references. If you've ever had to check references, you know that nobody ever gives a reference that's not going to be a good one. So what's the point of all that? But I'm here to tell you, a lot of us can, to a certain degree, read between the lines when you call references, the difference between somebody who is really, saying something about someone who is very positive, or whether they're just not saying much, which is always a red flag. This person in particular had glowing references. In fact, one quote from the reference process was that she was somebody that they wished they could clone. So by all accounts, we believed at that time that we had hired a veteran staff member who was particularly well-suited to meet the needs of the vacancy that we had. She cleared all safety checks, both Corey and Safis. So from a hiring perspective, there are no red flags. We do not believe we missed anything. There was nothing in that process. In terms of through the course of the year, we went through the normal processes that we go. She was being evaluated in that process appropriately. She had been observed by the administration, as all of our staff are in the fall. And again, this is a program in which there are a tremendous number of staff in and out of the program every day, serving those students. And the administration is in and out of that room regularly, supporting those staffs with the varied needs of the program. So, this isn't a situation in which, a situation sort of was brewing because we weren't noticing it because there wasn't getting attention. This is a program that gets daily attention. And up until that point, there were no indications. Now, as we opened up the investigation, there were things that came to our attention that concern us. But before I say that, in the investigation, we have an obligation, and it's constitutional for what that's worth, to provide due process through the proceedings. And I just want to editorialize that I fully understand, especially when something as egregious as this has happened, why it's frustrating that we have to follow certain processes the way that we do. But it's imperative that we do so, because failure to do so weakens our position. And so, we take the investigatory process very, very seriously. We've been trained by legal counsel multiple times to really establish a district in which, when things happen and when things go wrong, we are in a position to do this work successfully. And I am proud of the work that the administration at Thatcher did in handling a very, very difficult situation. Now, the fact-finding is a lengthy process. They did interviews over the course of 6 days between 11/26 and 12/19. Okay? Those are school days that they had other responsibilities and other things planned that they had interviewing people, sometimes multiple times over, because each time you interview someone in an investigation like that, when someone reports a new detail, you then have to go back and corroborate that detail with everybody. So every time something comes up, you got to go through and interview everybody again and ask each person, is this something that you saw? Did you have to go through over and over again. I'm trying to get to the bottom of what you can say definitively you believe happened and what you're not sure about what happened. Through that process, we did discover several events over the course of the fall, none of which rose to the level of slapping a student, but especially in the context of what eventually did happen, did concern us. For the most part, they related to what we would call poorly executed restraints. And we have to deal with that, that the problem being that the staff did not report their concerns that they had about what they were witnessing, about how certain situations were handled, to administration. Because at the end of the day of the incident is the first time the administration was made aware of a concern, even though there had been a handful of events beforehand that caused concern among the staff, even though in the context of what goes on there, they decided not to report it, but we feel like you shouldn't ever decide to sit on those things. It's much better to pass that along and let somebody else decide whether or not we have a concern or not. And that's one of the problems that we did uncover, and I'll talk about how we handled that in a second. At the end of that process, the principal then reaches their conclusions. They have findings, and those findings are based on their evidence and their best judgment as to what they believe happened. It is not a court of law, right? Basically, the principal has the power to, based on the evidence, reach whatever conclusion that they think is most likely. And that is exactly how this concluded. I am sad to report that that process did not yield an explanation for why this happened. There is no explanation. that I can give the community or anybody, because none came out of that process. But we did feel like there was enough evidence to take action. And so what are the outcomes of this whole episode? Well, one, the teacher involved no longer works for the Attleboro Public Schools. And, back to the work of the investigation itself, that is a fact in this moment, to me, is a complete validation of the work done by the administration, because I am here to report that, when we get to a point where we're disciplining staff, they have rights, and the lawyers get involved, and it is the job of the lawyers to find fault in our work. And if we are not perfect, I am here to tell you, as a person who's had to face that situation and other situations, they call us on it, right? And that this concluded quickly with the employee no longer working here is a clear statement that we did this appropriately and correctly. And that's I think how we demonstrate our commitment to the accountability for what has occurred. We also recognize that we have work to do with the staff, right? So the people in the room have already been retrained on their obligations as mandated reporters. And the building as a whole we have plans for, at their next PD day, to retrain staff. We need to both retrain them on the obligation for mandated reporting, but also we're going to do some de-escalation training as well, back to our concern that some of the restraints were questionable, and we want to make sure that we get those right. So these are the ways that we've handled all of that. We continue to work with the families who were involved in the situation. Some of them are already back in school. Others are looking for placements in other programs, and some of them, were somewhere in between. We take responsibility for what happened, and we're working with these families. And all of the incidents that were uncovered through the investigatory process, all the families were notified, and so anyone who has had any sort of direct involvement has been reached by the school and informed of that. So back to transparency. Everybody who has a right to know anything about this case has already been made aware. So that is my debriefing of the entire episode, and I would open up to your questions.
So I know, or I expect everyone on the committee has some form of comments or questions, and I'll field those in a moment. And I just want to reiterate a couple of points that in talking to some members of the committee, in the sense that I've gotten since this incident happened, is the shared disappointment that this did occur, and the acute awareness on our part that this did violate the trust of the community and painted the schools in a light that we don't, of which we particularly do not approve. And we have felt the community's angst around the transparency and accountability of this. And I'll reiterate that it wasn't for lack of desire to share details. It wasn't part of a cover-up to not share details. It was purely the fact of this being resulting in an employment action that involved students that required this to be handled as discreetly as possible until the matter was resolved. And so I appreciate the superintendent's full explanation of that, and pointing out that important consideration for due process as a key part of the timeline. So while I'm grateful to the administration for fielding questions, we have been in touch with legal counsel, so there are some questions that we still may not be able to answer, especially as they relate to specific individuals involved in the incidents. So if there is a question that may put us in a legal predicament, forgive me if I intercept that question before the superintendent answers. But at this time, any questions or comments from the committee Mr. Bennett?
Thank you. I just have a sort of a basic factual timeline question. How many students were slapped?
All right, so the answer to that is 2. So the staff member witnessed one slap of one student and went to report it. When the teacher was questioned by the administration if she knew anything about a slap, she self-reported a second slap that had happened after the first slap. So I do know that there's been some question as to whether or not the second slap happened before or after the administration had been notified. And to be very clear, both happened before the administration had been notified.
Okay. Because that strikes me as the biggest miss, is that things can happen once. It seems harder to see how that could happen twice, but what I'm understanding now is the timeline is before any of this could be reported, there was a fire alarm, a problem. Getting all these special needs kids out of the classroom is obviously the first priority that has to be done. And then by the time it got reported, whatever else had happened had already happened.
Correct.
That makes a little bit more sense to me. Thank you for clarifying that.
Any other questions, Mr. Domenici?
Thank you. It was somewhat related because that's the number I thought, but you mentioned working with parents, and I guess my question is, are there other parents, because this happened, that had considerations about taking their child out of our programs?
So there are,
Not just the folks directly impacted, but others very closely impacted? Were we dealing with some of that as well?
not to my knowledge. In fact, the number of requests for the program has actually gone up since this happened. So we have people still coming to Attleboro trying to get into the program.
Okay. I only mention it because the way you would phrase it is, some students are back and others are not. And I'm like, well, how many affected students are we talking about? So it's not more than the two?
Well, there's more than two people who were, as part of the investigation, that we reached out to families to say there was an incident, we believe that there was reason to believe an inappropriate restraint, something like that. And so those families, were notified and are still with us.
Okay. Thank you. That clears it up for me.
One clarifying question I have, just because you started talking about the context of the classroom being very, very different than a traditional educational setting, and then later you used the phrase a couple of times, poorly executed restraints. For people who are not familiar with special education, especially in rooms with needs this high, can you just provide a little more explanation as to situations where restraints may be required, and not you don't have to demonstrate any restraints or anything, but
good, because I'm not trained to do so. But I'll do my best. To be clear, this is not my area of expertise. But one, all the staff in this program and programs like it are safety care trained, because it is part of the work that they do, that they need to be able to, as best they can, de-escalate student, which is what a majority of the training is about. So in this room and others, students often have a communication disability, and so their struggles with communicating leads to behavior, as is like, we like to say, behavior is communication, right? Mm-hmm. And so their behavior is often an act of frustration at their struggles to be understood and to communicate what it is that they're trying to communicate. And so interpreting that correctly and helping students to not get further agitated is a big part of those jobs, because the last thing we want to do is to handle that poorly and to escalate the situation and make it worse and cause them to act out. So there's a lot of training that goes into helping to understand that and to de-escalate so that situations remain safe. When a student does get agitated enough that they become a threat either to themselves or others, our staff are trained to restrain students in a way that is approved and that is part of the training. And so, the goal is always to not need to get to that. And in fact, a lot of the physical interactions that I was talking about earlier really are blocking techniques, right? So staff are trained in how to, when students act out, these are young kids, so it's mostly sort of like flailing behavior, blocking that in a way that keeps them safe, and also, keeps the students safe is a lot of what you'll see in that room.
Any other questions or comments from the committee? Mr. Larson?
Yeah, thank you. I think it's important that the community knows that obviously this is in no way acceptable, and it never will be. And I hope the community understands that, everybody in this room, it's the safety of everybody in our buildings, the teachers, the staff, the students especially, and especially the more at need parts of our population, that their safety is the most important thing to all of us in this room. And I think it's worth repeating, I guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions or thoughts? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, on to another serious matter. Last week, we had a flurry of activity in the form of executive orders from the new presidential administration. We anticipate that this is the beginning. There are more to come, I'm sure, in the weeks and months. The first thing I'd like to just comment on is that I think it's really important as a district that we do our best to not let the media's interest in keeping us interested in consuming media lead us to overreact to legitimate concerns. And there are legitimate concerns to be had here. But I want the committee and the community to know that we have a responsibility to inform you all when we receive notice that something has happened that somehow changes conditions in the district. And when that's not the case, ultimately it's our responsibility to alleviate the concerns that are created sometimes by such coverage. And I'm speaking specifically this time of, Worcester Public Schools published a letter or sent home a letter last week. I actually haven't read the letter, but I certainly read the stories that the letter was about, that was mentioned in the letter, and I read the details, and the disconnect for me between what the headline claimed at the top of the story and the details of what was in the letter, because the headline was sort of sensational, and then when I read what was the contents of the letter, I said, well, that's true, we do that, that's exactly the case. I would just say that, and again, I'm making no comment on any of my colleagues. I don't know what the intent of the letter was. Again, I haven't even seen it. But I will say the intent of the media coverage was to certainly get people's interest in the story. So our responsibility is to administer the school district. And we do that in accordance with community oversight, as you provide as the school committee. We pursue agreed upon goals. We're going to hear about those in just a bit. And we adhere to school committee policy, right? The rules that you set for us. We also have a responsibility to operate as a district in accordance with law, right? Both state and federal law. And that's a big part of what we do as a central office, is to make sure that we're doing what the community is asking us to do it, and doing it in a way that matches what legally we're required to do. And from my perspective, nothing that happened that last week changes any of that. Our goals are still our goals. We are here to serve students, and that includes all students. It's in our mission. It's part of our goals. We're here to serve our students. And we, again, strive to do that in a way that is legal, and that hasn't changed either. And in this case, the laws haven't changed. I just want everyone to understand that because nothing has changed on that front, even if the agenda of the executive branch, which occurs whenever there's, a change, doesn't necessarily change all of that. So, couple things. I have good news and bad news for people who have, a political stake in the issue at hand, which is immigration. We do not, nor have we ever, obstruct lawful actions, right? But we also don't violate individual rights. These things can be in tension, and it's, part of the joys of being in the administration to try to sort out how to make that all work. As for ICE, in particular in this case, again, what the details of the Worcester letter, the details that we shared with families on Friday, we do not share student information or turn students over to anyone without parental permission unless we're legally compelled to do so, right? Your student information and your children, are in our care, and we don't just hand that over to people unless they legally force us to do so. And that's the way it's always been. I mean, that's, as a district, we've operated that way because that's what the law requires us to do, and nothing that's going on right now changes any of that. Basically, that's where we stand. That's the information that we shared with families. We're working with the administration to make sure that all of our staff understand what that means exactly. We'll see how things play out on both the national stage and, here in Massachusetts. But at this time, I feel like we are well positioned to handle, what comes next, whatever that may be.
And I know the administration shared the Attorney General's initial response as their attempt to reiterate the state's legal standing and the school district's protocols in any particular situation. So any questions from the committee or comments from the committee? The only one I would, just for clarity purposes, one of the headlines I saw related to the letter from Worcester Public Schools was that buses are being advised to continue driving should they see immigration officials at a bus stop. Has the administration's plans extended to the transportation and?
We are working with Bloom to make sure that our bus drivers are reminded of what, again, it already is the policy. Mm-hmm. We don't hand over children off the bus to strangers. That's already how we operate, and that's not going to change. Certainly, if there's reason based on reports from other districts to believe that this is going to be something that we face here, we'll certainly take steps to make sure we're on the side of these things. But if that were to happen here in Attleboro, the expectation would be that the student would be returned to the school and that the agency that is looking to take custody of that student work with the administration and it'd be the administration's job to sort out whether or not they have a legal right to do so.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Thank you.
Okay. Last one. As I informed the committee on Friday, Attorney General Campbell had informed the superintendents last week that she is proposing legislation to ban cell phones in schools in what she calls bell to bell, which means during the school day. Explicitly, she said that she does not want policies in which allow students to have access to their phones in passing time or during lunch like we do. So we need to keep a close eye on that legislation and how it proceeds and what the outcome of that. I know I've said in some places, I'm not sure exactly from this particular seat or not, but I have said before that, I have a stated preference for wishing, we could wave a wand and make cell phones go away, that they're a major problem for our schools and a huge distraction for learning. And, if I could have that not be a problem anymore, I would. Certainly, if the state passes a law that makes that the reality, well, then that is as close to, a wand, I guess, as you can have. I would like to remind the committee that, we did implement a new policy this year. It's going well. It is an improvement, but it's not perfect. And I think it appropriately reflects, some of the practical trade-offs that we thought that as a district made sense for us to make. So in this moment, there's no desire by the administration to make a change on that. If we ever got to a place where I thought that it wouldn't be a complete distraction to try to take a further step, I might want to do that again in the name of what's best for learning. But in this particular moment, in the context that we currently have, for us to take that on locally, I think would be a huge distraction and not worth the capital we would have to spend to make a change. I think we did find a good medium ground that didn't, cause such an uproar that, became a distraction. So I think we've done good work on this front. I think we'll be in a better place if we have to take a more drastic action. But that's, for the state to decide. And like the things we've been talking about all night, we will follow the laws as they unfold.
Any questions or comments regarding cell phones? Well, I think it would be helpful for there to be a standard policy. I don't know that I've gotten mixed reviews from other districts about their cell phone policies, where it is what the AG refers to as bell-to-bell. So I think there are pros and cons to all these approaches, but I happen to enjoy what Attleboro is doing. Mr. Bennett?
Thank you. When I saw that headline, my first thought was, and I just want to commend you guys, my first thought was, it's so good to be ahead of this. Like, you guys did all that work to figure out what was appropriate and to reach out to parents and to come up with some reasonable, what I think, and both of my kids who were, for what it's worth, adamantly opposed to any cell phone regulations or restrictions or being punished for things they haven't done yet, as they so charmingly put it. Both of them say this, told me like in the first week of school, hey, that new cell phone thing is working out great, it's no problem, kids just put their phones away. So just kudos to you guys and kudos to the administration for, in this case, being ahead of the coverage. Like, whatever they do, if they say you can't let them use it during the day, if there's a law about that, that's a different story. But I think the generally moderate and reasonable approach towards allowing kids to use cell phones when curricularly necessary and to be rewarded with access to their cell phones when non-destructive is all around the way to do it. So that's all I want to say. I'm glad that this is a case where we're way ahead of the curve.
Thank you. Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, it's almost annoying a little bit because, you guys and the policy subcommittee, we did so much time dedicated to this. And once again, the state's behind they're behind the times, waiting and waiting and waiting. We've seen that over the years with other things. And now, in the end, they might make this change, and all this time and effort and everything we did was for nothing. And that's a shame, because if they had just made this decision up front and made it a law, then that's what we would have gone with, and we wouldn't have had to, spend all this time. So it's kind of annoying, but I guess that's, we've seen it before in other things, and I'm sure we'll see it again in the future.
Yeah, it's par for the course. It's exactly what's happening with MCAS,
Yes,
right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, we're used to it.
Yeah, exactly. But, ultimately, I think what you're saying is right. We have to follow law. That's what we're doing in all these things. That's why so much of what you've been saying on these topics are, and that's what we do in our policies. We follow law. So, thank you.
Keep trend setting. Any other questions or comments? All right.
All right, moving on to something a little bit more uplifting, I will turn it over to Ms. Regan to give you a progress report on our strategic plan.
Okay. Thank you, Superintendent Sawyer. So in reflecting on navigating toward 2025, it did two things for us. It accelerated us in areas that we needed to move quickly, for example, one-to-one devices during the pandemic, but it also gave us a little bit of extra time to really reflect and put together some, I think, thoughtful practices and structures in the district. And so this will be the last time that you hear me speak about navigating toward 2025. We will review for you tonight a summary of all of the goals, and I think some of the broad strokes, what we've accomplished with this strategic plan, and look forward to presenting the new plan to you in June. And I think we're off to a great start. We have a great committee working on that already. All right, so for tonight, this will be the last time that you see these three goals. Goal 1, as we've seen before, centers on developing our students' full potential. Goal 2 is focused on maintaining reciprocal and meaningful relationships with the community and our families. And Goal 3 is about meeting the diverse needs and interests of all of our students and the community. So broadly speaking, for Goal 1, with student learning, we developed and implemented professional development for our Portrait of a Graduate, which includes 4 distinct pillars to communicate, collaborate, innovate, and balance. Teachers were trained, and this year they are integrating those characteristics into their lesson plans and supporting students in understanding why they need to be able to effectively communicate, why they need to learn how to innovate. And so we'll be continuing with that work in the next strategic plan as well. It is something that will become part of our core, part of who we are, and part of what we believe all of our students need in order to be successful in a ever-changing world. So. Another area that I feel like we've made gains in using district-based decisions. We have a data dashboard now, and many of our teachers and administrators use the data on a regular basis in order to see our students that are actually succeeding and growing and doing very well, and those students that may need some additional support, and what that looks like and how that translates into the classroom setting. As Mr. Gay likes to say, instead of expanding CTE programs, he opened up a brand new school, right? So we have the Attleboro Technical Institute. It had a very first successful session, and the second session is continuing and will be starting after February break with the same 4 shops that will be open, including auto, HVAC, metal fabrication, and plumbing. Another area that I feel that we are proud to say that we had a hand in changing is our middle school schedule to include a section for band. We've seen a great return on that. Our high school band is growing, and to the point where we need additional band uniforms, Mr. Furtado. We need to make sure we get those in. And I think our students are also flourishing in this area, as you saw tonight with the visual arts. Our performing arts is also flourishing with the addition of that in our middle school schedule. For Goal 2, with family and community engagement, I can't say enough about the Welcome Center and the work that Ms. DePalma and her staff have done, and the services that she's provided for our students and our families. They are given special treatment right from the first moment that they register their child with streamlined online processes. And then from there, if a child is in need of additional support for social emotional needs, we have the process where they're able to receive that support immediately through the William James interface. We also have the APS resource guide, and within that guide, there are numerous resources related to health needs, nutritional needs, and medical needs, and also housing. And so having that resource available to our students and our families and the community is something that I know we are very proud of. We also increased communication across the district with the use of our new website. We also with the use of the APS app. We know that it's not perfect, but it is a step in the right direction in order for teachers and students to be able to, teachers, students, and families to be able to communicate with each other in a safe, contained environment. And then also an increase in the good work that we do through our social media channels. Being able to share photos of all of the work that we want to celebrate for our students. Once again, I can't say enough about the work with all of our staff and partnering with so many different community committees and councils and boards. We have a real direct connection to many of those organizations throughout the city, and I feel like we're in a very different place now in terms of having a reciprocal partnership of supporting those community organizations and the community organizations also supporting us as well. I think another thing to highlight is our Night to Discover that started under this strategic plan. Had a meeting today where we're planning, extending it out and opening up some of the CTE spaces so that folks at Night to Discover can actually see the work that students are doing physically in those programs. And so it just continues to grow each year, and we're proud to be able to highlight the learning experiences that our students engage in every single day, as well as the community partnerships that we have. I do also want to thank Ms. Singer and her department in her ability to be able to offer the educational leadership cohort for our administrators across the district. We're working on having our second cohort just starting up right now. She also has provided us with new employee training, and that's enhancing our ability to share information, important information with staff. So it's not just at the beginning of the year when most staff are hired. These are now held throughout the year, making sure that everyone has all the proper information. She's also created a portrait of an employee similar to our portrait of a graduate, which highlights all of the characteristics and qualifications that we expect our staff to have, and that also share with our mission and vision. And we also supported our schools in increasing or refreshing the PBIS supports, integrating them into the structures that they already have in their schools. And then Mr. Reed's youth court continues to grow, and really thinking about ways that we can provide restorative practices to students and helping them really understand how their actions have an impact on others and helping them to reflect on that as well. So in terms of next steps for us, we appreciate navigating toward 2025 and are ready to move on to 2030. And we have our second meeting this week on Wednesday evening. We'll be looking specifically at Goal 1, which is focused on student learning. And then we'll be continuing to have meetings through, we have one meeting scheduled in February and 2 in March. We hope to be able to put all of the graphics and design together for that so that we can present to you a full strategic plan on June 2nd. For the entire committee.
Any questions or comments? Mr. Domenici?
Thank you. It's always good to see and do kind of that reflection on, we get the right notes, did we hit the right notes? Because I remember the 2020 plan, though I wasn't a part of that planning committee, I was part of the start of the 25 planning committee. And the 2020 plan had a lot of bold initiatives, and we realized it was too many. Like, we got a lot of stuff done, but there was so much on the plate. We had to pare it down and really get it to where we, could focus within a few tangible goals, and then obviously, you know, those goals have subsets to fulfill. So it's great to see the fruits of that labor paying off. Chris and I were part of the Youth Court Advisory Board meeting the other night. It really was exciting to see a lot of the good work. He's outpacing, they're outpacing last year's numbers in terms of participants and trials, and he's building data so that he can really start making data-based decisions in the direction with which the court wants to go. So that was really exciting to see, because he's got a lot of great ideas, what he calls his 9-year plan. So hopefully we get that stuff in sooner. And lastly, you know, I guess imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So, you know, I'm really proud of the work we've done to, you know, start Portrait of a Graduate, and clearly others like what we've done because they're starting to emulate it and maybe even take a little credit for it. So I just want to congratulate the administration on that.
Mr. Storrs.
Yeah, one of the things I like about it is I see some new things, like the youth court, things of that nature, which, you know, it's got the recency bias, and it's you know, something that's meaningful. But then I also see some things that have been in development for some over a decade, like Portrait of a Graduate you just mentioned. I think that first time I heard that must have been at least over a decade ago in Attleboro. Nobody had ever come up with some concept like that. And now you're talking about Portrait of an Employee. Let's copyright that right now. Attleboro, copyright Portrait of Employee. So, I mean, the point is, like, seeing those pillars and seeing things that have been in development for so long, and also some things that are new and happening, I think that's very meaningful. It says a lot about what this district's doing. So, thank you.
Mr. Larson.
I'm just going to go back a few slides back. It was a pleasure back during the holiday season to see the band at the concert and all the other choral groups. I mean, they did a fantastic job. And then to watch some of the other concerts that I couldn't attend on the cable channel, and just to see the strength of the middle school program is huge, because without that program, there is no high school band. So I'm very grateful to see all that. I also have the privilege of coming in and out of the building 2 or 3 times a week, so I see the activity in the Welcome Center. A lot of us don't see it, but it's amazing the traffic that goes through the Welcome Center. I have not tried to get into the beanbag chair, so I'm not going to try that, but there's a huge outpouring of support to, you know, watching new registrations, families looking for additional services or help. And being able to have that for the community is, in my opinion, huge. And, you know, it's one of those things that flies under the radar because, you know, it happens during the day, it happens in the morning, it happens all throughout the day, and a lot of us just don't see it. And then my last comment is, when is Night to Discover? Because that is it's a really fun night. So when you have a date for that, if you could let us know, that'd be great. I want to make sure we can mark our calendars, so.
You do, I just want to make sure that I give you the right one, I believe.
I want the right date. I don't want, you know.
I can give you the wrong date, Bill.
Oh, okay.
March 12th,
Great.
6 p.m.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Geddes. I also want to go a few slides back and talk about the arts, and specifically being able to add school band to the middle school schedule. And I'm glad to hear how that is really feeding the high school marching band. You know, about marching bands, there's a special culture and a special community within, both within the marching band community, in individual organizations and across organizations. This community tends to be very supportive and encouraging as its members push boundaries and reach outside their comfort zone to learn some very complex things in a short amount of time and display this publicly. And this builds a lot of grit, and it's transferable to other experiences in life. And a perfect example of this community, I don't know if folks had a chance to see a video that was floating around between the Attleboro and Brockton High School marching bands, where there is a a drum roll, kind of call and answer, and they're each supporting each other and hyping each other up. And it's just a perfect example of how that builds even greater community. So thank you for making that happen.
Any other questions or comments? I'll say, having been a part of that, the 2015 Envisioning 2020 process, and then having been in the room a couple of weeks ago as we started the 2030 planning, the support for maintaining the district's core values and the mission and vision was strong, and I think that it was a very rewarding feeling, remembering how hard we worked on that whole process, be it school committee members at the time, soon-to-be school committee members like Ms. Johnson and I, then Assistant Superintendent Sawyer, and some of the other administrators and educators. And to see how positively impactful that has been over the last 10 years has been remarkable. By no means to discredit previous district administrations, but I don't think it could be overstated how impactful these types of visions and this type of goal setting can be for a district like this. I feel like a lot of what has been accomplished is solely because the administration and the community partnered to put it on paper and say, these are our ambitions. And to Mr. Domenici's point, some of that was very ambitious. But I remember the concept of a community engagement office as a sketch of a potential organizational chart at some point down the road. And what that was supposed to look like and what it has become are two very different things. And what it has become greatly outpaced what we expected it to be. And I think that's the CTE program, the middle school music programs. These are all things that exist, at least in part, because the community needed them to exist from the schools. So thank you for all of your continued leadership, Ms. Regan, in developing these plans, and looking forward to the final presentation in June.
All right, I have one last item for you this evening. For that, I'll call up Mr. Furtado.
For the two.
I need you to speak to the committee about the Thatcher Free Library.
Okay. We had a request from the administration at Thatcher Elementary School to allow for the construction of what they're calling a free library, which is essentially those small structures, feet by feet on a pole that are always open and allow students to both take a book or provide a book into the structure. It being a project that would ultimately alter school grounds, that would need school committee approval. They are not at the point of having a final design. I do think that they are close to identifying the spot that they want it, but I wanted to, bring it to the committee's attention. I would suggest giving a conditional approval based on final plans and location, to allow them to continue thinking about how they're going to do this. They're doing it in conjunction with their PTO, so it's not the school doing it.
All right, so I'll actually entertain a motion to provide initial approval of the Thatcher Elementary School free library pending the school committee's review of final plans and design for approval.
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. So just to be clear, we're just approving for the school and the PTO to move forward with planning for the project.
Finalize their planning.
And we would be approving any finalized plans and requests. Any questions? Mr. Larson?
I almost hate to even bring this up, but as part of that final, at some point in the future, could we have some idea of how they're going to control what goes in the box? Just because that seems to, the public seems to care what books different people see, and I just don't want to head down that road all over again, so.
That would certainly be something for the committee to consider.
I'm the ones that I've seen out in the public, anybody can put a book in, anybody can take a book out, and you understand. So I'm going to stop talking now.
Absolutely. No, I do understand. And I don't think there is a mechanism to control that because the box essentially won't lock.
No, that's the part I understand, so.
So that may be a condition you'd want to consider upon final approval, is to say it has to be reviewed every morning by the,
Well, I guess I'd like to, as part of that final proposal, have them decide how they're going to all that.
you know, I think that would be a good conversation to have.
I'm afraid of it already.
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you. I have some reservations about this for exactly the reasons that Mr. Larson has intimated. Particularly because we spent some time in the policy committee this spring reviewing our library acquisitions policy. And as any school library, any book that's in that school library is there for an educational purpose or is there for whatever. We have a policy that explains how they decide what books to put in. And any uncontrolled, you know, we have a little free library on the corner around from my house. I think they're great, right? I don't think anyone dislikes little free libraries. But if it's on school property, it is in fact a school library. I don't know about the legal definition of it. I certainly don't know anything about that. But it seems to me it is a library. It's called a library. It's got a little free library sign hanging on it, and it's on the school property. So my feeling deeply is that, like, that's probably not the best place for one of those. And books that go in the school library need to go through the school library acquisition. We have a process for that. So for that reason, I don't think this is a good idea. And I hate to say that even because I know that these things are fun and it gives people joy to share books and, you know, put it on another street a block away from Thatcher and tell everyone about it. Or do something else is my take on that this is not wise.
Mr. Frappier?
Sure. I guess the question I'd raise to the committee is the city or the school department any more liable for graffiti or something else on public grounds than the contents of a library on public grounds? I would argue we can't be held liable for the graffiti or other contents that I don't think is as big of an issue. I do understand the concern, but if it's not in the building, I don't think we should have the same controls over it. And asking to exercise a level of discretion over the content of the library would torpedo the idea right away. There's no way to control an unlocked box and what gets put in there in any meaningful way. I would just say I don't think it introduces the level of liability that we're talking about.
And I think for the purposes of this motion, this would just give license to the school and the PTO to explore the possibility. Any final say or policies related to would be part of the final proposal for future approval. Mr. Storrs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that's why this discussion right now is a good thing, that gives those who are advocating for this, they understand where we are and some of our concerns, and they can try to address that. I'm kind of torn. On one side, I love these things, they're great, but I know our policy, and I know that we have a person who safeguards certain things based on our policy, and usually that's the librarian. If all of a sudden you have a box, an open box, and it's a book, it's not, it's an actual, books that are going to be going in there, I share concerns. I can see how this could be very problematic very fast. So if they can come up with concepts to try to mitigate that, that would be wonderful. Maybe putting it across the street might be better than putting it on school grounds. But I think giving them the leeway to go research it and provide the details to us, I think that's a good thing. That's where I'm at with it.
Any other comments or questions for the administration? All right, so we have a motion and a second. Again, the motion is to provide an initial approval of the Thatcher Elementary School free library pending the school committee's final review of plans and design at a future date. All those in favor of the motion? Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Thank you. The motion passes 7-1. For the record, for the vote, Ms. Sawyer was here but had to leave because she was obviously not feeling well. So that's why it's not the full 9-vote vote. Thank you, Mr. Furtado. We look forward to hearing more.
And that concludes my report.
All right. Next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes from our January 6th and January 13th meetings. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
Right. We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion, updates, edits? On the January 13th minutes, the minutes showed, I think it showed Ms. Johnson and Mr. Domenici as being in attendance, but they were not at that meeting. That was the brief special meeting that we had to hold in relation to the field trip approval. But other than that, any other edits or updates?
Oh, I actually wasn't there either on the 13th.
Oh, and Mr. Frappier. Thank you. So any other edits for the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda are our consent items. There are 7 tonight. I'll take all of them as one motion if anyone has any concerns, unless anyone has any concerns. Seeing none, we have a motion to accept a donation from Bliss Restaurant for the gymnastics team in the amount of $230.60, check number 01803 to the high school gifts donation account. Motion to accept a donation from Chipotle for the class of 2027 in the amount of $43.53 to the high school gifts donation line. Motion to accept a donation from the Blackboud Giving Fund in the amount of $50 to the high school gifts donation line. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $60 from Charities Aid Foundation of America to the Hyman Fine Gifts donation account. Motion to accept a donation in the amount of $5,000 from the Feinstein Foundation to the Brennan Gifts donations account. A motion to accept a contractual obligation in the amount of $30.90 from Bay State Textiles to Hill Roberts Elementary School. And a motion to declare 2 maintenance lifts as outlined in the Director of Finance's memo dated January 27th, 2025 as surplus and to be given to the city, to be put through the city surplus equipment claim process as they have outlived their useful life and have no residual value at this time.
So moved.
Second.
Any comments, questions about any of these items? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next on the agenda is subcommittee reports. We'll start with our Policy and Personnel Subcommittee update from the January 13th meeting. For that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Storrs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The following motions for policies as well as student handbook language and compliance officer job description all came out of the subcommittee unanimously. I'll go through it in sections as it's presented on the agenda. In our first, this is, for all of these policies, it's a motion to note the review date. All these policies, they align with masks policies, which is what we're always trying to do. Policy DA, fiscal management goals. DB, annual budget. DBC, budget deadlines and schedules. DBD, budget planning. DH, bonded employees and officers. DI, fiscal accounting and reporting. FA, facilities development goals. FF, naming of new facilities. FFA, memorials. HA, negotiations. HB, negotiation legal status. And HF, school committee negotiating agent. Does anybody want me to take any of these policies separately? Seeing none, I'll put them right up for, since it was unanimous out of subcommittee, right up for a vote to note the review date. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Our next section, these policies all had very minor edits to align with mask or to meet our requirements. Policy DBJ, Budget Transfer Authority. DD, Funding Proposals and Applications. DEC, Federal Fund Supplement Not Supplanting Policy. KF-R1, Community Use of School Facilities Regulations. The policies have been provided to all of the members with the minor edits. Again, does anybody want me to take any of these separately? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Unanimous. Next section, this is to note the review date for the following policies that are specific to Attleboro's policies and exhibits. DBC-E1, Budget Process Timeline. Excuse me, DJAA, Purchasing of Food for Employees. DJB, Fuel Efficiency Vehicle Policy. FCB, Retirement of Facilities. HBA, Contractual MOA, MOU, and Amendments. KF, Community Use of Facilities. KFE2, Community Use of the Track. And KFE3, Use of the Attleboro High School Concession Stand. Does anybody want me to take any of those separately? Seeing none. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Unanimous. Next, we have a separate one to adopt a new policy, policy IHBD, Compensatory Education. This is to align with masks policy. Any questions, debate, discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. Next, we have a motion to adopt policy IKF, graduation requirements as presented. Again, this discussion came from the recent changes from the election, where MCAS is no longer going to be a graduation requirement. The state hasn't come through fully with their recommendations on policy-related information. We do expect that sometime in the future. Mask always seems to come through at some point down the road. So when that comes, we'll take a look at it, see how we did compared to how they do, and we'll, address it as we need to. But the administration did a lot of work on this. They felt that we did need something in place now because this affects students this year. So being that was the case, that's why we're looking to adopt this new policy, IKF. I'll put this up for discussion. Is there any discussion, questions regarding graduation requirements? Please.
Yeah, for me, it might have been just a little bit of a math issue because 170 credits are the requirement, and it looked like the requirements for for ELA, for social studies, for math, for science, all those on the table added up to, I think, 122. So is it the expectation that the remaining 48 credits are whatever electives that are qualified, and the student has that choice, just as long as they have 48 credits in elective courses?
Yeah, this credit chart is aligned with what is in the program of studies moving forward, and so it aligns with 4 years of English, math, science, and social studies, and then all the electives would then also supplement that.
Okay.
And again, I'm glad that you brought that up because that was part of our discussion during the subcommittee meeting as well, that Attleboro has higher requirements than most other schools throughout the state. For example, although I believe every school might require 4 years of math, they do not require it for social studies. Well, we do. And there's plenty of other differences as well. So that's why when you look at the number of credits, and whether or not a credit is one-to-one, that's another discussion because it's all based on time and this and that and all this other stuff. But our credit requirements is like much higher than what is required by the state. So just thought that was worth noting.
No, I agree, and I'm all for that. I'm all for having high standards. I think that puts us ahead of the curve in a lot of ways. Just the chart, that's all. If there was like a line that stated like, other elective courses make up the 48, I'm a guy that ties things out, that's all. To me, like as a budget guy, I looked at the math and it just didn't come up right. I didn't want to make assumptions. But if that's what the difference is, then I'm fine with it.
Any other questions or discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, unanimous. Next, everybody should have been provided the update that we're looking to do for the student handbook language. Again, this addresses the graduation requirements. So is there any questions or discussion regarding the student handbook language? And again, just to verify, we're going to send this out, or we'll just post it? We're going to be posting it, please?
It was adjusted the next day.
Yep.
In the student handbooks.
Yes, and that was important. Could you explain why that's important?
Yes,
Yeah.
so as part of our integrated focus monitoring with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, one of the final pieces that they needed to have adjusted in the handbooks is this specific information about manifestation determination. And so this information was already in the letters that we sent home to families that are for the hearing for them to attend for a suspension hearing. However, the department also wanted it to be included in our handbooks. And so thank you for allowing us to make that changes so quickly and for agreeing to have it be placed in our handbooks. So we were able to do that immediately the next morning after the subcommittee meeting and made the changes in the handbook, and we were able to receive no findings as a result of that.
If we had not got that in at that time, we would have ended up with a finding. I tried to table it, but the rest of the committee wouldn't let me, so. So with that, are there any other questions regarding the student handbook language? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great. And the last motion is a new job description for compliance officer presented in the packet. Is there any discussion or questions regarding that? Please.
It's a question. Are we searching for one, or is this something where we've hired and we just needed a job rec to have on record?
The posting is an internal posting that's open right now.
Okay, thank you. No other questions for me.
Please.
And this, if I remember correctly, this is an adaptation to a previous job that had been posted, but there were some pieces missing to that,
Yeah,
correct?
so this was the previous grant manager position, and that previous role also included other responsibilities with it, including like Title I and supporting our English learners. And so we have someone currently in that role that is funded through the Title I and Title III grants. And so this role, which was a grant manager position, was still open and vacant. We had gone through a couple different processes, and even including a recruiting firm. We weren't able to find anybody that actually met what we were looking for. And so given that we've added on additional things to this compliance officer role specific to the regulation around grants, as well as some of the processes that we need to follow for investigations, we thought that putting those two pieces together made the most sense to call it a compliance officer.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, unanimous. Okay, again, the committee, speaking for the committee, I want to thank the administration on all of their hard work, as well as the other committee members. I appreciate it. And that, Mr. Chairman, concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Storrs. Next is an update from our Teaching and Learning Subcommittee from their meeting on January 14th.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. During our meeting of January 14th, the subcommittee received updates regarding the Mass DESI Integrated Focus Monitoring Review, the implementation of the English 3D program, and the ongoing math pilot being conducted at the elementary level. The Massachusetts DESI Integrated Focus Monitoring Review, say that 5 times fast, it's one of the components of the state's general supervision system. It's conducted on a 3-year cycle, and it's conducted in every school district, whether it's public, private, charter, vocational, virtual. This specific review focuses on compliance of the state special education requirements and civil rights policies and procedures. For the past 6 months, in particular, Ms. Medeiros, our Director of Special Education, and Ms. Regan, our Assistant Superintendent, have been working closely with DESI representatives, compiling all the data they required and any additional data they requested to be used to determine compliance of the mandated requirements that are a focus of this review. Some examples include IEP meetings, evaluation timelines, content reevaluations, transitions from early childhood to secondary, the graduation dropout and attendance rates, and feedback from families that were conducted through multiple surveys. This data, along with the on-site visits, observations, and interviews by DESE, is used to create the final report that lists any noncompliance and any resulting corrective actions. So the cycle for the Attleboro Public Schools concluded, and the district received the final report at the end of December. And I'm happy to report that APS was in full compliance. There were no findings, no corrective actions. Good news there. I also am excited to share with the committee and the community the results of the family feedback from surveys sent to our special education families, and these were sent in multiple languages as appropriate. From the nearly 200 responses, there were no broad trends of concern. And a few things I want to call out, that over 90% of the respondents stated that they felt their IEP input was valued. 88% felt their students were receiving adequate support. And some of the comments included themes of feeling welcomed and observing enormous strides in their students. So kudos, great job to our special education department, and thank you to Ms. Medeiros and Ms. Reagan for all the heavy lifting and hard work you've been doing over the past few months there. I'd also like to share with the committee an update on the Read 180 and English 3D programs. These programs focus on foundation skills, fluency, and language acquisition acceleration for students who are acquiring English language skills or who are English language learners. We have programs at the middle school level and at the elementary school level. The programs at the middle school level have had great success. One of the things I want to call out is we've been seeing students raising their reading level, 1 grade level, in about 3 months of time at school. So that's fantastic. And we do have a similar program at the elementary school, but we're continuing to pilot other programs. And these pilots will go on throughout the spring to make sure that we are settling on the best program for that level. And then my last update is regarding the math curriculum pilots that have been being conducted at the elementary school level. The current program, Everyday Math, has been taught for the past 20 years in the district, and our math curriculum review committee felt it was time to search for a program that better meet the needs of our students. This committee has been focusing on this pilot program for a while, and I really want to call them out for remaining invested, engaged, and passionate about bringing the best learning experience through high-quality instruction that meets the needs of our students during this year-long pilot. After vetting multiple programs, conducting the pilot program, and surveying both educators and students, the Math Curriculum Review Committee is recommending a program change, and they have asked the district to pursue onboarding iReady. We're hopeful that the 25-26 budget will allow for that change in part or in whole at the elementary school level. So again, Mr. Furtado, some more work along with those band uniforms. Any questions or discussion? Okay, seeing none, that concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Next on our agenda is open forum. Is there anyone here that would like to address the committee as part of open forum? Seeing none, I will close open forum. Reminders of our upcoming meetings. Our Finance and Budget Subcommittee will meet here in the Zito Conference Room on Wednesday, February 5th, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. And the next full school committee meeting will happen here in the Zito Conference Room on Monday, February 10th at 6:30 p.m. Any other updates or new business for the committee?
I just had a question.
Mr. Domenici?
In your update to the committee, you mentioned and shared a link about the governor's numbers on the budget coming out slightly higher. And I looked at the link and it had the state contribution. I was curious if we know, are we talking a rounding error? Will it have some impact on our overall budget by, is it too early to know, or?
Oh, it's a few $100,000. It went from 109.8 that we proposed to 110.3 or something like that. There's money there.
Okay.
Yeah, so I would just clarify that the number that we discussed earlier this month was our estimate for what it would cost to run the district as it stands now, next year.
Right.
And, we know that we have to make changes. We just discussed things that, need to be done. And so, the next part in the process is for us to propose a budget that meets as many of the needs as possible. And, that number historically is greater than the level service estimate. So it's good news for the process that we're starting with a number that is slightly higher rather than what it is in many years, slightly lower. So that's a good starting process. But, we got a long way to go before we reach a number that we propose to you for you to pass to send to the city.
Thank you.
And if the trend holds, typically the next steps in that process up on Beacon Hill have tended to result in increases to that number rather than decreases. So, but it's just as likely that what the governor put forth is what we're going to end up getting.
Don't know what to expect exactly. Yes, historically, the number goes up, not down. It seems to me that as a starting number, it's a little bit on the juicy side, so I don't know how much there is to add to it, but certainly be pleased if that's the way it goes, and we'll work with our local delegation to do the best we can in that process as possible.
Considering you gave an update and we talked about somewhere around 2 to 2.5% maybe wiggle room with the budget to do anything that isn't already contractually obligated, every dollar helps, especially when Ms.
Absolutely.
Johnson just gave her update about a new math program, so.
Any other updates or new business for the committee? All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Have a great night. We are adjourned.